Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Stamping with Sara webisode. Well, today I'm really looking forward to showing you this versatile stamp set from hot off the press called Stamp a Garden. So here we have 39 clear silicone stamps, and you can see from these designs here just how versatile they're going to be for your card making and other paper crafts. So not only do you have these beautiful botanicals, you've also got some smaller swirls and accent pieces in here, as well as sentiments that work beautifully for the front or the inside of your card. Now when I flip over the package, you can see from Lene's projects on the back that we've also got some fun layering and overstamping possibilities. And for those techniques, I'm going to use an assortment of the Hunky Dory dye-based ink pads in a variety of colors. So we'll combine the two of those and have some really fun and beautiful techniques. Now we're also going to be working with the Be Happy 12 by 12 paper pack from Hot Off the Press. You can see the designs here on the front of the package, but we can also flip through and take a closer look. So in this 12 by 12 collection, you have 12 coordinating sheets. You're going to have 2 each of these paper designs that I'm showing you here. There are also 56 cutouts. You can see some of them here, some larger ones, as well as some smaller ones, again, perfect for the front or the inside of your card. Now, if you are already a member of the Stamping with Sara webisodes membership, you already know about these stamps and the papers. If you're not a member, do stay tuned to the end of this webisode for more information on how you can get each month's stamp set early and at a discount, even better. So as you can see, we have a lot of creative possibilities to explore today, and I'm really so glad you're here. So won't you please come stamp with us? The silhouette style of stamps that you have many of on this sheet are perfect for a watercolor ink layering technique using a little bit of water and our Hunky Dory dye-based inks. And by silhouette style of stamp, I mean these solid images here, like this piece, the floral butterfly, as well as some of these botanicals here, and this large leaf element, which is the one that I've used on the front of my card. And you can see here on the card itself that I've got a variety of different shades of kind of a yellowy green, light green, and dark green, all on one image. And this has been created using my dye-based inks and some water. It's a really super easy technique to do. And what's fun is that it will give you a completely different look every single time. So let's have a go. I'll move aside my card here. And the image, as I mentioned, is this one up here at the top. Now I've already got my MISTI set and ready to go. Here I've got a piece of white cardstock secured down with the magnets. And the cardstock I'm working with here is from Hunky Dory. It's the Lightweight Essential Card Block. And what I really like about this cardstock is that it's a really nice, smooth white cardstock, and it stamps beautifully. You can use it for lots of different techniques, but of course for stamping, it's just perfect. And even though it is fairly lightweight, it does hold up to this watercolor technique. So that's really nice. So I have a little piece here secured down with my magnets, and I'll bring in my different ink pads. So for this card, I started with the Buttercup, and then I've added some lime, and then my third darkest color is the khaki. So I've started here, built up here, and then added final touches with this ink pad here. On the other side, I've got my silhouette stamp all ready to go. I've got my water mister on hand here too. So let's begin by inking up with this Buttercup. Now this is a fairly light color, as you can imagine, and so when I stamp it, it may be quite light to see, but I've got my first layer of ink on here, and then we'll go ahead and close this up, smooth it down. Now the other thing you can do, okay, I'm lifting this up and it's quite faint to see. The other thing you can always do, if you want to intensify a single color, you can always just leave everything in place and come back and repeat it. And you can do this as often as you want to create more depth with your color. Okay, so there is my buttercup. Now what I'll do is I'm leaving everything in place. I'm going to come in with my lime and I'm going to ink up my stamp. I haven't cleaned it, which is why I'm starting with the lightest of my colors. And then what I'll do while I have this on my Misty, I'm going to come in with my water mister and I'm just going to give 1, 2 quick mists of water here. Don't want to overflow it. I can always come back and add more water, but taking it away is difficult. Okay, and then I'm going to stamp that on there. So you can see again, I've got a little bit more color differentiation on here. Now, while this is still on here, I'm going to come back in with my khaki. So this is the darkest of the colors, and I don't want to cover up what I've already stamped, but I do want to just add a little bit of darker color here. Now, with these ink pads, because they are raised up off of that plastic base, you do have some control about positioning where that ink will go. So I've just kind of gone around along the stem and around the outside areas of those leaves. Then I've done 3 quick mists with my water mister. And then I'm just going to come in here and tap this quite lightly. And there you can see I've got the detail images on here. And I think this came out really nicely. If I wanted to add some more of that darker green, I could just simply come back in, maybe add another little quick press. I'm not adding full force on here, but just kind of tapping that on there. And then I've got some really nice, very variegated color on here. Really simple and easy to do. But the fun thing is, too, that you will get really different looks just depending on how much water you're using and how much ink you're using. Now also here I've got a little butterfly. This butterfly silhouette stamp was stamped using the Prussian blue. And same process as before. I've just inked that up and did a really quick mist of water. Because it's a smaller image, I didn't want to risk flooding the whole thing and having a little blob instead of having a butterfly shape. So this is as easy as it gets. Now to clean off my stamp, I'm just going to give a little bit of mist here with my water and then pull that off and pull off my cardstock, and I am ready to add this to my card. All right, so I'm going to move this aside and then let's take another look at the card because I've got some other inking going on here. So as I mentioned, I've got my butterfly stamped with the Prussian. I've also got my sentiment stamped on here, and for this I'm using the VersaFine black, the onyx black, and I'm just overstamping that. No misting involved with that. I want to keep that as crisp as possible. So after I've done all of my stamping on here, I did die cut this piece into an oval shape, and using one of my favorite die sets, the 12 oval and scalloped cutting dies. So I've die cut that into the smooth oval, and I inked around the outside edges of that with the dove gray, just to give a little bit of definition around there. I also have this scalloped oval underneath, and this is also die cut from the lightweight cardstock. And then I've done some ink blending around the outside edge. So let me bring this in here. And for this, I'm also using this Prussian blue. I really like this color. It's a very dark, rich color, very intense. So I'm going to grab my blending brush. Now I am working again on that craft mat, so this is going to save my work surface. And I'll just pick up a little bit of this color. Now because it is quite an intense color, I'm going to start with a light touch. And I'm just working gently and slowly around the edges here. And I'm working from the craft mat into the surface of my cardstock. And then I'll just angle this around here and finish off the entire piece. And this is a really nice way of getting ink around the outside edges, especially when you've got a scalloped or more detailed edge to go around there. Because even though you can do a lot with these little ink pads, it's very difficult to get into the little inny areas of the scallop. So this is a great way to add some color on there. And again, I'll just mist my craft mat and mop this up. And then when I'm done with this, I can simply layer those pieces together and then pop them onto the front of my card. So my card front is simply covered with this beautiful pattern paper, and then I use the blending brush and the Prussian blue around the outside edges. So again, just working that color around on all four sides there. When I do this, I do tuck a piece of scrap paper inside the fold of my card just to make sure I don't get any wayward ink on the inside there. Then I've got my focal, which has been added with foam tape, and I've got a little tiny bow there, tied in jute twine as my finishing touch. And then for the card inside, I have some more of that beautiful pattern paper, and I have another smaller layered oval with the Thanks a Bunch stamped with black. This card features the same watercolor technique, but with different colors. And this is where you can really start to see the different types of effects you can get, especially when images overlap. So let's take a look. First of all, for these two botanical pieces, I've used the same 3 ink colors. So I started with Shamrock, and then I added the Holly Green, and then I added the Khaki. So 1, 2, 3, and misting, of course, and that's also going to give me this pretty soft watercolor effect. And I really like, too, how in this area here, with this botanical especially, you're getting the combination with that Shamrock and the Holly that gives you almost a teal color. I really, really like that. So I've got a couple of other elements here on the card. So those were the 2 larger botanicals, but then I've also got this really pretty element here and then 2 smaller botanicals on either side. Now this was a little bit of a process, so I want to talk you through this process because I discovered that I could mute back some of my bolder colors with a lighter color. So let's talk about that. Here I've first stamped with the Vintage Rose, and then I thought I wanted to add a little more intensity, so I brought in the Orchid, and that was too much. That was too orchid. And so I was able to tone it down with some of the Lime Zest stamped multiple times. So I want to show you this process because it's a really fun way to mute back some of your bolder colors while still keeping that nice contrast in there. So let's have a look here. I'm going to move these aside. And the image that I really want to focus on is this one here. And this is this design here. Now when I do my demo, I'm going to stamp with this, and I'm also going to stamp with this kind of Queen Anne's lace image because I want you to see the difference between the two of them when we do a side-by-side comparison. So I'm going to bring in my Misty. Once again, I've got another piece of that white cardstock over here, and I have my 2 botanical images here. So I'm going to do the stamping at the same time. So with both of these, I'm going to start first with the Vintage Rose. So let's ink this up, and we'll stamp these together. So this is going to be our base layer. All right, so there we go. Those look pretty. And then I'm going to come back in with my Orchid. And this was where things got too orchid for the design that I wanted. And I was halfway through. I had some of my botanicals on my cardstock, and then I realized, oop, it wasn't quite right. So I misted this a couple of times, and I think you'll be able to see it was pretty bold. It was pretty orchid. Now from here, what I'm going to do is keep this side-by-side comparison. So this guy will just keep as it is. I'm going to actually just move him off of my Misty. And then what I thought was, oh, I can tone this down a little bit. So I just kind of dabbed off the excess color here. I didn't clean it completely. And then I came in with my Lime Zest. And I ink that up. and I misted. So then when we start to add this additional color on here, I think you'll be able to see it's toned down immediately. But let's go ahead and do what I did for my original card. And I came back in and I added more ink and another little misting because I did want to keep that watercolor effect. Okay, and then we'll press that down, and there we can see it's starting to get darker and deeper. And let's go for a third time. And I'll miss that. And then we'll stamp this again. And I think when we see the side-by-side comparison, you can really notice that this is quite orchid. I mean, it's really pretty, but this is giving a slightly more muted, toned down design, which means that when I put it with my greens, it really does come in together very nicely. So as I've got my elements overlapping on here, it does really create a nice effect between that kind of soft mauve color and those beautiful greens on there. So if you get along stamping and say you've stamped this piece and then oops, you've got way too much orchid right in the middle there, instead of starting all over again, you can mute that back. So just keep everything in place on your stamp positioner and just keep going with a lighter color. But who knew that Lime Zest would be the one to mute that back so nicely? So then what I've done here, I've trimmed this down into a rectangle and I inked along the outside edges, and I was using my blending brush and the mustard ink pad for this, and that gives a nice soft effect there. Then I've matted it onto a slightly larger piece of white cardstock. I'm also using the 8 Labels die set. So I've got this little banner piece down here, and what I've done there is simply die cut the banner piece and then folded it over a little unevenly like so, and then I've stamped my sentiment using the VersaFine and layered that up. There's a little bit of foam tape in between those two layers after I've done my stamping, and that's then secured onto the front of my card. I'm also using the 8 Labels die set up here at the top and the bottom. So let me show you on my die set. This is one of my favorites. So here's the banner. You can see you've got a large and a small. And then I've also used this outside element here. And after die cutting it, I simply snipped it in half this way so that I'm able to keep this really pretty straight edge. And I've tucked a little piece up here and then one down at the bottom. Now I've got a little bow tied in 1/8 inch ribbon that's glued on top, and then I've got everything layered up and glued to the front of my card. So I've got my pattern paper here. This has also been inked around the outside edges with mustard. It's trimmed down slightly smaller than the front of my card and just glued that right on top. For my card inside, I have some more of the patterned paper and that same die cut shape. This time I left it as it is. And I have the leaf and a smaller Queen Anne's lace piece here, again overlapping. And then I've got my Sending Smiles sentiment stamped right on top. So we've seen the watercolor technique. Let's look at another way you can use these stamps. And this is a technique called overstamping. And you can see this with the blossom on my flower here. So I've got 2 different layers here. I first stamped the silhouette and then overstamped with the detail of the same image. So you can see here on the stamp set, this is the botanical piece that I'm using. So I've got the silhouette and then I have the corresponding detail layer. When you stamp this on top of this, or vice versa, they will line up to create 2 different layers. And you've got a couple of different options on this stamp set for this technique. So this blossom up here, this can go with this, or this can go with this. You've also got the butterfly here, those 2 options, and you've got this really pretty botanical. This one is one of my favorites. And what's really nice is that it gives you essentially 3 different looks. So you can stamp just the silhouette, just the outline, or both. And if you're stamping both, you can choose to stamp them in line, as I've done here, where it's really precise, or you can slightly offset one layer from the other. And that gives a really pretty and kind of freewheeling effect. So let's have a look. And I'm going to demo with this leaf image down here because I like this one so much. So I've got my Misty ready to go here. I have my white cardstock on one side, and I have the detail image here on the other side. Now, which layer you start with, it doesn't really make a difference. Either one, kind of the first one that you grab is going to work. I'm going to stamp my detail image, and I'm going to stamp with the VersaFine. So this is a nice crisp black, and we'll just ink this up and stamp it down. And you'll see you can stamp this as it is and it will look beautiful. So black and white image is also a really gorgeous effect. Such a pretty design. Okay, so I'm going to mist this a little bit just so I can clean it off and set it off to the side. And then I'm going to bring in my silhouette version of the same stamp. So if you're working with a Misty stamp positioner, what you can do, leave your cardstock in place and then just position your stamp on top here. Now, it does work a lot better if you can stand to do this. I'm sitting at an angle, so we're going to see how good my aim is from this position. And I'm just going to pop this right on top, more or less, and then close this up here. And then from here, I can add my silhouette color. So let's try this with the shamrock. This will give us a nice bright green look. There's no misting involved before I stamp, although you could. So that would give you kind of another effect too. But I've just got my ink on here, and then I'll press this down and we'll see how I did. I did okay here. It looks like I got off base a little bit up at the top, but you can see the effect so that you're able to get two of those colors in one go. And this works really nicely. Now I mentioned with the misting effect, and I did do this just to experiment, and I didn't add a whole lot of water, but I did add some a light misting to that shamrock green before I did my overstamping. So it's not quite as watery as I would have liked, but you can experiment with that, and that's also part of the fun. So another little idea to keep in your mind as you're mixing and matching your stamp designs. Okay, so I'm going to move this out of the way, and we'll bring back in the final card here. Got ink pads all over the place. So here for my card project, I'm using the lovely lilac for my blossom here. For the outline and for the stem, I'm using Muddy Boots. And then for the botanicals over here, those leaves, I'm using my favorite here, the khaki, and I think that works really nicely. Now I've also got some smaller little floral accents here, and those I've also stamped with Muddy Boots. Now, this process can be done also without the Misty, so with just a clear acrylic block. You will need to eyeball the placement there, but it can be done, and is another awesome way to use your acrylic blocks for that. So now that I've got my image all stamped, and I've done this onto the pattern paper from the paper pack, so I've got some really pretty kind of faint lines in the background here. It worked for a nice neutral background. I trimmed this down into a rectangle and then inked around the outside edges using the Dove Gray. Matted this onto a light green cardstock before putting it onto my card base. Now those two green colors that I'm using are from the Be Happy cardstock set. So I've got the light and the dark green. You can see those over here. Now my card base is a center step design, so this is going to give a really fun dimensional effect. And this is made using the Center Step Plus card design. And this gave me the perfect center place for my stamped focal. So here's the die itself. You have one metal die included in the set. You've got a nice project idea here on the front I'll flip it over and you can see your written instructions, as well as the M's and the V's on here, which will indicate your mountain and valley folds. So you'll just fold those up. I like to use a bone folder to score up those lines. And then you will have a finished base ready to decorate. So again, that will open up like so on the sides. It's a nice one to display. So I've trimmed down my piece and glued it into this center area. I first wrapped around the bottom with some jute twine and then added this focal piece with foam tape. So that will give me a little bit of extra space because I've got my jute twine wrapped around the back. And then separately, I've got a bow tied in that same jute twine, simply glued onto the front. Then for my card inside, I have another look. I've got the vintage rose stamped as my floral here in the center. And then this botanical piece here has been stamped with peachy. And I think that ended up looking really nice. And then, of course, I've got my khaki for the other botanical piece here as well. Muddy boots for my outline and for the stem of the flower. And then the black, the onyx black for my sentiment. And I've die cut this portion from the 12 rectangle and scalloped die set just to give a slightly different look. Our last card project shows another example of overstamping here with that beautiful botanical. And I've also worked in some splattering here too, using the Muddy Boots ink pad. So let's talk through the focal part of the card and then we can look at the construction of this cutaway style of design. So first I've taken my patterned paper and I've torn one edge and then worked with a little bit of water to roll the edge for some additional texture. So let's have a look at this. So I've got my two pieces here. I've torn one edge and then I've got a straight edge over here. So I'm just going to mist the edge of this, the torn edge, just to make it a little more pliable. And then I'm going to kind of roll it back. And you can add as much water as you need. You do want to make sure that you're not oversaturating it. You do want it to be flexible but not soggy. So you'll kind of roll this back and then either let that dry completely, air dry, or you can give it a little zip zap with your heat tool if you want to. And this is going to give you some really fun texture. And then simply add this on top of the corresponding piece. So that's going to give you some nice little bit of dimension on there. So that's what I've done for my card focal area here. And after I've let that dry completely, I've added in my stamped botanicals. And I've stamped these with some of our favorites here. I've got the khaki here. I've also got the Muddy Boots, and then that bright color is Lily Pad. So these three are coordinating together to give this really pretty effect here. Very soft and subtle. And the Muddy Boots are here with these smaller botanical pieces, as well as the splattering on the background. So this is with a watery wash of Muddy Boots, and I'm keeping in mind my craft mat here too. So this is going to serve me as my palette. And for this, I also need, again, my water mister, and then I also need my water brush. So what I'll do is simply take a little bit of that Muddy Boots. It's quite a dark color here. And I've just pressed that onto my craft mat. And then I'll mist kind of close to it with some water and make a watery wash here. Mixing this in with my water brush. Now the more water I add, the lighter the color will be, of course. We'll start with this. And then what I'm going to do is just hold my brush perpendicular to my pattern paper and just tap the barrel of it. And that's going to give me my splattering effect. I can do as much or as little as I want. And then, of course, because I've got my handy dandy craft mat here, this is easy to clean up with a little bit of water. So let this air dry or give it a little bit of heat from a heat tool and you're ready to go. And so that's what I've done here. I've die cut this into a square shape, and that's going to fit really nicely onto my cutaway card. So for my card base, I've started with the Hunky Dory cards, the blank cards, and these are the 5x5 card blanks. You get the cards and the envelopes here. And I've combined this with the green cardstock from the Be Happy Solid Cardstock Pack. So I've covered just the front flap with that dark green cardstock. And then I took one of my dies from my square die collection. So this is the 10 square and scalloped die set. And I've got my scalloped square here. Now this fits just perfectly. So I've aligned this here. I've got the top portion off of the fold of the card. So here's the fold of my card. Open sides here, I've got that position down, and then I've also left a little bit of space down here at the bottom. So you're going to align this, secure it down with your low tack tape, and then run it through your die cutting machine to get just the front flap. So this will open like so. So you've got your really pretty scalloped edge along 3 sides, and then you can fit your square piece right in the center. I have a little jute bow. It's the only additional element I need to add on here for a touch of softness. And then I've stamped my sentiment with the Onyx Black ink pad. Then for the inside, I have another square of pattern paper with the leaf stamped in khaki, and then over stamped with black for the detail, and then I've got my sentiment added in here. And this is our final project of the day today. So a big thank you to you for joining me here today. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope you've really enjoyed the different techniques that you can do with our stamp set today. And of course, all of the beautiful pattern papers that we've incorporated in here as well. Now the stamps and the paper pack are available in a money saver, and you can see that special offer on the right hand side of your screen. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the webisode, way back at the beginning, we do have a stamping subscription available too. This can give you the latest stamps and papers. You'll be the first to receive the stamp of the month. So today you've got our Stamp a Garden design, and you will save 10% on the retail price. You also get a free goodie each month, plus a free gift with your membership. And the free gift is this wood grain stamp, which is a really wonderful background. It's a super useful design to have in your stash. And this is also shown on the right-hand side of your screen. If you happen to be watching us on YouTube, we'd love for you to subscribe and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And please do join us on paperwishes.com. This is the only place you will find this fabulous membership subscription, plus a whole lot more. You'll also see that we create 6 webisodes every week to inspire your creative spirit. Thank you again for joining me today. We're really glad you're here, and we're so happy you're a part of the Paper Wishes family. Do feel free to leave a comment. We love to hear what you think. I'll see you next month for another episode of Stamping with Sara.